Sunday the 29th of December. Right now I set up the ST80. I'm using the ASI Studio, not the ASIair. I am beginning the process of capturing videos in real time tonight because the ASIair allows me to do so. Right now we're having a look. 5-second exposures. Ideally we would be picking up Messier 31, but there's a reason we are not, and that's because Messier 31 has progressed really to the point where it is now behind the palm tree in the backyard. Nor can we image NGC 147, a satellite galaxy of Messier 31, in Cassiopeia. Okay, Messier 31's distant Cassiopeia and satellite galaxies are actually quite large. But not quite as large as Messier 110, which is about 16 orbits in its greatest presentation. These are like somewhere in the 8 to 10 and 12 with the different aspect ratios. But you can see NGC 147 right there on the screen, vaguely. Not the best presentation. As I mentioned in a previous video, when I first got started with this ZWO real-time stacking image production and visibility, I have seen this through a 3-inch scope, and it looked pretty much like that, but the conditions were much superior. Stars to magnitude 6 could be seen in the region because it happened to be on a rim of Crater Lake in Oregon with the 3-inch scope, which probably added about, I would say, at least 3 magnitudes to what I'm seeing now in the night sky. Let's have a look now as we zoom in on this study and see if it brings it out any better. It kind of does make it a little more obvious. Let's see what we have in terms of, now we're up to 40%, which I don't want to push it beyond because of a lack of focus on the part of the scope, which has very, very rough focusing capabilities that are best used with an eyepiece in real time. So that is our view of NGC 147, a distant satellite galaxy of Messier 31, the Great Andromeda Galaxy, and which is our neighbor in space and eventually will join the Milky Way in a cosmic marriage in about 3 billion years. Okay, now we're making a series of passes attempting to identify NGC 891. And you know what? The 3-star alignment I did with Vega, Deneb, and Capella put it right in the middle of the field of view. Which means I can try. Now you're noticing some reflected luminosity there. Fortunately, it's not encroaching on the galaxy itself. So let's try the zoom function. That's a 30% zoom. Now remember, we are looking for the central bar. We're getting 5 passes of 5 seconds each. This is real-time imaging, unlike what we experience with the ASI application, which works remotely but does not give you instantaneous feedback. It does look like we could be doing a little more focal improvement, and I will do that right now. We'll see what happens. Remember, I do not have a fine focusing adjust on the ST80. And what I did just shifted things off. I went intrafocal a little bit. It may very well have improved it. Let's do it one more time. Intrafocally. Turning the knob towards the objective in a clockwise direction. Yes, 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 we are beginning to see the central bar of our mirror galaxy, NGC 891. It's a little larger than the Messier galaxy, but it's a very similar galactic type. Many astronomers believe ours would look very much like this at the distance at the distance NGC 891 is, which is about, I believe, 31 million light years. I'm going to make one more slight adjustment on the focus. Let's see if that improves things. I think it made things a little bit worse. Let's give it a chance to formulate the image on. Oh no, I think we did actually improve it. Central bar of 891 is beginning to reveal itself, We are taking a series of 5-second exposures, and they are all being stacked. It says here 5 exposures. You know what we're going to try? Oop, wow. Let's try 10. See what we get with 10 exposures of 5 seconds each. What it should do is it should cancel out background light. Each exposure is laid over the top of the next. And I had to do that using the histogrammic controls on the ASIair app. Like I said, I much prefer ASI Studio and basic. Oh, look how nicely defined the central, the center of the galaxy is becoming now. Very good extension in space. Let's try another expansion since we're so well centered. Okay, now we're up to about the size of NGC 891 as it appears in the Revolution 2 imaging system. Our field of view is quite good. I'm going to zoom in one more time and you can see the percentages. So let's try 80% zoom. That means we're now using 80% of the pixels in the imager. Okay, we're still in the field. Let it go ahead and capture its 5 exposures at 10 seconds each and see how it turns out. The sky here is probably better than it's been for a while, except for the first night I started doing imaging. So we are looking at NGC 891. It's about a 10th magnitude galaxy, 13 by 3 arc minutes in apparent size. As once again mentioned, it is similar in basic morphology and maturity to our own Milky Way galaxy. Something I want to point out is that galaxies do get smaller as they condense. Our galaxy is about 2/3 the size of Messier 31. There's the central bar. Very, very nice. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera off and give this thing a chance to stack some more images, and then we'll return to it before finding another study. Okay, we've now made our 5 stacked passes. I have expanded the screen to fully take up the laptop display. Let's see how much further. This is 100% zoom, and I assume that 100% zoom means that every pixelated location on the 3000, I believe, 3008 by 3008 is currently being activated. And we're finally getting a view where we are overexposing the background light. Typically this would occur in roughly 5-second single stack exposures, and then I would have to adjust it histogrammically on the ASI app that is used with the ASIair remotely sitting in the room. Now I do believe there are histogrammic controls here on this unit, so why don't we try the histogrammic controls. Alright, that gives us a black background sky, same basic control set as we've had previously. The galaxy is now beginning to emerge. It's very pixelated. I'm going to basically try to remove the pixels, and then we will push the brightness up a little bit and see what we could get. Alright, we're not getting any improvement over the standard settings apparently. There's the dark sky. We'll stay with that. We'll back out a little bit. We see the galaxy now. It's highly pixelated. Maybe 10 seconds is a bit long. But we can see the dark lane bisecting a very large Messier 891 at 100% zoom. So let's drop back. And it shouldn't have to recompile the image while we're dropping back. So we went from 100% to 90% to 80%. 70, 60. We're starting to see the encroachment of the light here on this part of the screen. I just noticed it now. I'm not sure whether it's visible always, but it's much more readily apparent when we get down to 60% because of the position. Oh yeah, we're starting to look through the palm tree. So let me back out some more. 50. It's the palm tree that's reflecting the light off of its leaves. You can see it there. 40, 30, 20, 10. Come on, I think it went down to 16% last time. Anyway, we'll stop with that. We're going to move on to another study, but look how fine the stars look over there in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, here we have the first of 5 exposures at 10 seconds of Messier 37, that brilliant open cluster that looks rather Christmas tree-like, in Auriga, the charioteer. The stars all look very pretty. We're at 20% gain, which means we're probably got something like almost 1.5 degrees of a field of view. And since we're doing 10 seconds exposures, it'll take a little bit before we see the next update. I can play with the histogram, and let's try it right here and see what it does. Oh yes, nice dark background sky at a setting of 26:214, which I have yet to figure out. I don't think I really need to shift the bright, just the dark filtering out of everything below that. So that is a very nice view of Messier 37. Now we're going to go to another cluster, which is perhaps my favorite, but I'll give you another shot of this one before we actually depart. Well, a departing vehicle just activated the security light, which is why we are not getting another look at Messier 37. You can still see the influence of the light in the upper right-hand part of the screen, but that is an absolutely glorious view. And the light should disappear, it just turned off, of NGC 7789, a very compact, a large and well-populated open cluster in Cassiopeia, which I've imaged previously using the El Quattro, the 150 f4 Newt. Frankly, I have to say, under these conditions, I am getting better views. And it's too bad I can't get another view of Messier Galaxy Group and 31, 32, and 110. But I'm getting better views using the 80 millimeters than I was in the 150. The 150 will be fine if I install it in the observatory and there isn't all this incident light. Fast, large fields of view, the ability to zoom, and I will be using the laptop or an iPad, Apple iPad Pro, to image with at that point. But this is very good, except for this luminosity now reflecting off the palm tree, which I can see is very close to where the scope is pointed. Okay, what we're seeing here is the Pleiades. It should be obvious. It has that dipper shape of these stars in this location, swirly around. And Messier 45 is that open cluster. It's about 500 light years from Earth, quite large. We're pretty much spilling outside the screen. The one thing I'd be interested in seeing if I had a filtration system on the scope, and perhaps I can play with the image processing to select for certain colors, it would be very nice to see some of the nebulosity associated with the cluster, because it is a relatively young cluster. It's less than 1 billion years old, and it's got some illuminated reflection nebulosity associated with it, and it should see a continuing flux of star formation. I believe it's also the closest star cluster to Earth. And I have read somewhere that our own star cluster is still remnant, and we see it in the night sky as the Big Dipper. So we had our own cluster at one time, and then the stars were picked apart, of course, by the galactic gravitational tides. And the stars that we formed with are pretty much 5 or 6 of the stars in the Big Dipper. So that's something to contemplate, why we all have such an attraction, because that was our Sun Sol's birth cluster, as far as I remember. There's our view. What I'm hoping to see here may be our last view for the evening. It's a planetary nebula, NGC 40. It's bound to be rather small, but we'll have an opportunity to play with that zoom function again. Hopefully it'll be in this region of the screen. Watch for it. Remember, with the Rev 2 system, you have to actually watch it develop the images in real time to be able to better distinguish between small planetary nebulas and stars in the region. We're now at 30%. The camera is cooled down to minus 10 degrees centigrade, I'm sure. We're at 40%. if there's a planetary nebula present, it is that baby right there. You can see it. There's a bright central star and nebulosity. We're not quite centered in the screen, but that is quite spectacular. Look at that baby. Look at the color in it. All right, let's push it to 80%, and we're very fortunate at 90% gain, zoom. We are getting a fairly large view, and it'll be very interesting on the morrow to determine what the extensions of that planetary nebula are. We're seeing the central star and its illumination. We are seeing the planetary nebulosity thrown off by the central star as highly ionized particles. And we are getting a sense of frontier and some sense of texture. This is a good view. Now, I do believe this is a planetary nebula that you can get a pretty decent view of at higher magnifications through a 6-inch scope. But I doubt the view is anything as good as this. Now, I've only got 2 bars left on this camera, and I do want to capture later on again Messier 42 and 43 and maybe the Horsehead Nebula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break from actually filming or videoing what we're seeing on the screen, and I'm going to go ahead and charge up the battery in hopes that Orion will soon clear the roof line of the condo here, and we will be able to get a nice view of it. Meanwhile, I will research other potential studies. One thing I will say about the Great Orion Nebula, however, is we will not be able to do long exposures because it'll certainly overwhelm the CCD imaging system, but we can find out just about what might work well in this unit with the ST80 compared. I believe I captured an image, I may have captured an image using the F4 150 Newt. Okay, it's a little overpowering, but here is our view of the Great Nebula, of course, in Orion, Messier 42, with its neighbor Messier 43. I can zoom in a little bit, and I will do that. But I thought, we just concluded a visit from our neighbors who were showing a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for astronomy. That was my neighbor and his 2 sons. We're seeing an awful lot of transiting craft coming across the sky associated with it. I've seen several of these previously when our neighbors were here. So thank you to Diego and his son Diego and Benjamin for stopping by and sharing the views tonight. Wish we had had more galaxies to view. Mostly it was clusters, a couple of planetary nebula. And however, we did get a chance to wrap up with this incredibly nice view of Messier 42 and 43. Now what I'm going to do is do a little bit of a zoom. Oops, unfortunately it's not particularly well centered. So let's go back and see. Oh yeah, that's not too bad right there. Okay, so our concluding view for the evening. Give you a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds anyway, to view it. And once again, I'll articulate. I call this the Conch Shell Nebula, Messier 43. You can see the eagle's beak with his wings spread to encompass the core of the H2 region, a star-forming region where the progenitor stars are located. And you can see the reddish nebulosity extending out, a little bit of a blue here. The nebulosity is spreading all the way out to this region here with some nice texture in this location. So, with trapezium in the center, the progenitor stars. Can't see them, they're simply overwhelming with the luminosity. The views we got tonight, I would say, were equivalent pretty much to a 12-inch scope. The sky conditions were no better than magnitude 3. Yeah, I can make out the sword of Orion, so I'll have to check the magnitude of those stars. We had a very exciting and enjoyable evening, and what is probably not the best time of the year to be observing, especially when most of the fall galaxies, etc., are disappearing into the palm tree, to the west. With that, I will say, carpe noctem.